I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, poison in the pools. Where they should have found relief, the search is on for the person who attacked sea lions at a rescue center.
An aggressive response by state regulators to California's ongoing drought. I'm Amita Sharma. We'll examine the impact of sweeping water cutbacks for San Diego. Also, we observe National Stroke Month. We check in with a surgeon who is raising awareness about the symptoms and a look at how women are affected.
Are you hurt anywhere else? Your leg hurts. Well, you got a tourniquet on there. You're doing fine.
Any medics over here for head injury? Anybody available?
A mad dash to save armed suspects and victims, the critical training for future surgeons under the gun. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. County Water Authority is responding to the governor's mandatory 25% water cutbacks formally approved today by state regulators because of the ongoing drought. However, in a written statement, the Water Authority chairman said, quote, "We are disappointed the board's regulations do not encourage the development of new water supplies." Board members will review its regional response next Thursday. Amita Sharma tells us how these new restrictions may affect some San Diego businesses more than others.
As California regulators impose unprecedented water use restrictions on people, businesses, and government, a study out this week shows the drought is unlikely to slow San Diego County's economy. The big exception, of course, is agriculture. Joining me to talk about the drought's impact are Eric Brewald, president of the National University System Institute for Policy Research, and Eric Larson, executive director of the San Diego County Farm Bureau. Eric, with a K, let's start with you. What industries are mostly immune to the drought, and what industries are particularly vulnerable?
So we found about 600,000 people in San Diego work for industries ranging from retailers to some of our light manufacturers that largely use water inside the building for health and hygiene and outside the building for landscaping. And so those businesses are likely to not experience major impacts. But businesses like our microbrewing industry, our construction industry, our food manufacturing, and of course agriculture are likely to experience some impacts because they use significantly more water per employee and they use water inside the building for business processes.
So Eric, let's seize on agriculture. How severe have both the drought and the subsequent water use cutbacks been on San Diego County farmers?
The real tough thing about the drought so far is our farmers hope to not have to buy the very expensive water we have here during the winter months. And we had very low rainfall for a couple of years in a row, so the farmers have had to irrigate in November and December and January and February when they'd normally hoped to have a rainfall. So it really damages the bottom line, that lack of water and having to purchase it. Moving forward, we're expecting the cuts to come from the San Diego County Water Authority within the next few days, the mandated cuts to agriculture. Our farmers are so efficient because of that high price of water, they really have no place to cut. They're going to have to take acreage out of production to meet those demands, those cuts.
And they've already taken some acreage out of production, haven't they, over the past couple of years?
A lot of acreage has gone out of production due to that high price of water, especially the tree fruit growers. The trees in the ground, you got to keep it wet, and prices have not risen commensurate with the increase in the price of water. So we estimate about 10,000 acres of avocados are now idle. When I say idle, the trees are dead. Idle sounds too soft. The growers have actually turned the water off on those trees and abandoned those groves.
Now, you spoke before the State Water Resources Board yesterday, before they adopted tighter restrictions. What did you tell them, and how receptive were they to what you had to say?
Well, what we wanted to tell them, when the governor came down and he made his emergency declaration on April 1, he directly looked at urban water uses. What the governor's office and the State Water Board didn't realize at the time is farmers in a place like San Diego County are buying their water from urban water agencies. So our farmers got captured in those numbers and would be facing reductions from 20% all the way up to 36%. That just isn't going to work for us. So we went to the board, said, look, the farmers are buying from urban water agencies. The governor did not want to go after agriculture on this round of cuts. please pull us out of those urban water numbers, which they did. So we're not exempt from cuts. It's just the cuts will be instituted locally, not as part of the governor's emergency order.
And Eric, San Diego is in the 4th year of a record drought. Do you have any sense of how many more years of a drought this economy can withstand?
So as we look at it, at the current level of water restrictions and what the governor put in place, it's likely that our economy could continue to do pretty much as we've been doing under this level of restrictions. If, though, we see cutbacks in the 40, 50, 60% range, then that's going to put a real challenge, because then the impacts are going to be within the building. It's not just about outdoor landscaping, and some very hard choices are going to have to be made in the 50,000, 60,000 jobs that are in more water-sensitive industries. So, you know, if this is the new normal with the current level of restrictions, we can weather it, pardon the pun. But if we're starting to see restrictions that go well beyond what the governor proposed now, this could be really challenging for how businesses are going to have to adapt to a much drier Southern California.
And Eric, very quickly, are local growers experimenting with crops that don't require as much water?
Yeah, it's a real subject of conversation, and some of that's happening. Lower water crops like wine grapes, olives, pomegranates, we're seeing some interest there. There's not a critical mass yet, but it's definitely part of the conversation.
Okay, we're going to wrap it there. Eric Larson, Eric Bruval, thanks so much for coming on the program.
Thank you.
Of course, this issue is at the top of the agenda for our online poll at kpbs.org. We wanted to know, would these new cuts change your water use habits? 53% of our viewers say yes, 46% say no. Of course, you can weigh in on the poll on our website. Now, tomorrow on Midday Edition, something that may be able to actually break our drought. We explore the mystery of the blob, a stretch of warm ocean water off California's coast. That's tomorrow at noon on KPBS Radio. A long-awaited vote is expected tomorrow on a new gas power plant in Carlsbad. The State Public Utilities Commission is set to decide whether to approve SDG&E's plan to replace some of the power lost when San Onofre went offline. They will discuss plans for the Ensena Gas Plant due to shut down in 2017. Opponents of the plant support a recommendation to wait until SDG&E reviews its options.
The administrative law judge, based upon the facts after hearing expert testimony from SDG&E and many other parties, she's already concluded that no gas plant should be approved of any sort because SDG&E is sitting on bids from clean energy providers to get this job done.
The company that wants to build the gas plant says it's needed when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing.
Wind and solar are not available 24/7. They can't meet the reliability needs, 24 hours a day. You need backup generation for when the wind is not blowing and when the sun is not shining. And a facility like the Carlsbad Energy Center provides that on-demand backup generation when it's needed that can help integrate renewable power as well as preserve the reliability that we really take for granted.
Part of the bargain NRG struck with the city of Carlsbad was to pull that chimney you saw in the back of the old Ensena plant down. Now they're demanding transparency for an international trade deal. We're talking about 24 protesters who actually rallied today outside the La Jolla office of Congressman Scott Peters as Congress considers letting the president decide the fate of a trade package. It would set up special rules for 12 countries around the Pacific Rim. Protesters want Peters to reject the idea. A written statement from Peters says the congressman will continue listening and keep an open mind. A covert operation lands a former Navy SEAL in jail. Jason Mullaney pleaded guilty to stealing more than $1 million from other Navy SEALs, including a family friend. He then transferred the money into his personal bank accounts. Mullaney will spend 6 years and 8 months in prison. A new report says immigrants are sending more money to Mexico using money transfers known as remittances. KPBS Fronteras reporter Jean Guerrero says more of these money transfers were sent from California than any other state.
Remittances to Mexico went up 5% in the first quarter of this year compared to last year. The Bank of Mexico says $5.6 billion came from immigrants in the U.S. and $1.6 billion was sent from California. Tijuana received more remittances than any other Mexican city. Economists are saying it's a sign of a better economy. Businesses are hiring more workers. Many of those are in San Diego. Teresa Gomez is an example. She works the cash register at a San Diego meat packaging plant and sends money to her mother in Mexico twice a month. The San Diego resident says that's what she came here to do, work, to help support her family. Jean Guerrero, KPBS News.
An army of aid workers are on the ground in Nepal following last month's deadly 7.8 earthquake. Nurses from Scripps Health are there. They treated nearly 240 survivors so far. They left San Diego Friday. The nurses shared these photos with us. They are part of mobile medical teams who treated patients in mountain villages. Outside the capital of Kathmandu, the Scripps team plans on staying in Nepal for about 3 weeks. As aftershocks continue to shake the capital, many folks remain scared to return to their homes. The quake killed nearly 7,400 people. The World Health Organization says tens of thousands were injured. The major worry now is the long-term impacts from a lack of shelter to poor sanitation. Realistic trauma training is going on in Kearney Mesa this week, where medical students are getting prepared to handle real-life pressure. KPBS videographer Christopher Maui and I got a close-up look today at the action. A warning, though, some of the footage is graphic. Tactical police teams storm a house where gunmen are holed up with hostages.
Shooter.
Heavy gunfire inside the house as police take down the gunman, assess the casualties.
Building secure, building secure. Forward in, forward out. Stairs.
Then begin the mad dash to remove the bloodied suspects and victims outside for triage.
Give me another tourniquet.
Which one's a shooter?
And preparation for transport. These are real first responders and some actors or medical students wearing suits to mimic traumatic injuries.
He's got 2 wounds, one to the left leg, femoral artery, sucking chest wound.
Let's get that gauze cap out of the bag.
Get his hip, control the hip.
Screaming and moaning as they fight off care in the chaos. These injuries have traditionally been difficult to teach in a classroom.
Get that gurney out.
Or simulation.
1, 2, 3.
That's why 24 medical students have come to the back lot of a former television and movie studio in San Diego to raise their game and lower their stress levels.
The more you do this, the better you're going to react.
Good shots. Left chest.
Faculty sorely needed inside the ER and operating room.
What you risk now is cutting something like the bowel.
Where medical personnel are forced to work together in ways they might not otherwise.
Now, shoulder blade.
Cut suits combined with special effects create a more realistic experience on the operating table.
Cut. Keep going.
Traumatic injuries kill about 190,000 Americans every year and account for more than 2 million hospitalizations. But medical students are not able to operate as much on live human beings, so their skill level and confidence is lower. That's why this training is so important. Never forgotten, San Diego County paid its respects today to law enforcement officers who lost their lives in the line of duty. KPBS reporter Matt Bowler shows us how they were honored.
The ultimate sacrifice that is made by these brave men and women should not be forgotten. They are our brothers and our sisters. Today, they watch over us.
I am the surviving sister of San Diego County Deputy Sheriff Ken Collier, end of watch, February 28, 2010. I miss him terribly.
I would like to ask Chief Craig Carter and Deputy Pamela Murphy to read our roll of honor.
Daniel N. Benavides, end of watch, May 7, 2010.
Daniel S. Pheasant, end of watch, December 20th, 2006. Christopher A. Wilson. End of watch. October 28, 2010. Jeremy Henwood. End of watch. August 7, 2012.
It is left for us to remember and to revere and to reflect upon their dedication.
It's not how these officers died that made them heroes. It's how they lived.
Hands were raised as the bell rang in honor of state highway patrol officers killed in the line of duty. A flyover of CHP helicopters followed at a memorial for state troopers this week at the CHP headquarters in Sacramento. The names of more than 200 officers were read, including officers killed in an accident last year. Governor Brown also attended. Services included a 21-gun salute and playing of taps. Officers in Laguna Beach want to know who would want to hurt any of these sea lions. They say someone dumped a lot of chlorine into a salt water pool at the Pacific Marine Mammal Center last week. 17 sea lions were hurt. Workers say their eyes were all puffed up, burning from the chemicals. Those sea lions were due to be released the next day after earning a clean bill of health. Workers say this is the first known animal assault at the nonprofit center. May is National Stroke Awareness Month. Amitha Sharma has more on why doctors are putting extra emphasis on the symptoms of stroke in women.
Stroke kills nearly 129,000 people in the United States a year, and it is the leading cause of disability. 60% of stroke patients who die each year are women. As we observe National Stroke Month, we take a look at how women are affected. I'm joined by Dr. William Neal, who is a vascular neurologist at Kaiser Permanente. Dr. Neal, how well recognized are stroke symptoms, and what are they?
Yeah. Well, I think they're actually very under-recognized. I always give the equivalent of if somebody has chest pain, we pretty much all recognize that could be a major problem like a heart attack. With a stroke, it's a little bit different. The symptoms, I have an acronym that I like to use called BFAST, and it's the letters B-E-F-A-S-T. And I always tell people, any sudden difficulty with balance, eyes, face, arm, or speech, then it's time to call 911 because that could be a stroke. The biggest problem with stroke is that these symptoms are so under-recognized. We do have an effective treatment, but the treatment can only be given within about 3 to 4.5 hours. So by the time people realize maybe this is more than my arm fell asleep or I'm a little tongue-tied, it can be too late.
So 60% of the people who die each year from stroke are women. Is that because these symptoms that you just outlined are harder to detect in women?
There are a few different causes, so a few different reasons. On occasion, women will have a different type of stroke. There are two major types of stroke. One where you have a blood clot in a blood vessel to where you don't get enough blood flowing to the brain, and another type where you actually have bleeding into the brain. Women can be more prone to the type where you get bleeding into the brain, and this can be more severe, and it tends to be more fatal.
And what about, just offhand, when these symptoms aren't recognized, then treatment is delayed, correct?
Yeah, so if the symptoms are not recognized, and if somebody shows up maybe a day later, a couple hours later, and it's too late, the one treatment that we can offer becomes way too dangerous to give because it's a very strong blood thinner, or sometimes it'll involve a surgery. And if we wait too long, it causes more harm than good. So really, if people show up later, then we start to focus on recovery, meaning people will generally work with a speech therapist, a physical therapist, and a physical medicine doctor to get their arm strength better, to get them walking better, or to get their speech better. But it's a big problem if people show up too late. They don't have the opportunity then to get a medicine that can really make them better faster.
And what specifically is the treatment for stroke patients?
Yep. So there's one main one. The standard one is something called TPA. It's a very strong blood thinner. And we know that if we give it right away, there's a very good chance that the person suffering from a stroke can get better, occasionally make a full recovery without any problems whatsoever. If we wait a couple hours more, they have a decent chance of getting better and a higher risk of bleeding complications. And if we wait past 4.5 hours, the bleeding risk is too much, and we know that we really can't help them. Another option on occasion for some types of stroke is a surgery by which a physician will actually use a tube and a catheter to go through the arteries in the brain and actually pull out the clot. And then a third type of procedure is if somebody has a bleeding type of stroke, occasionally we can offer a brain surgery that can help minimize the bleeding and the swelling.
Very quickly, my mom had a stroke at the age of 54, and I found that her personality really changed. Is that common among stroke patients?
Yeah, this is one of the more under the radar things that can happen. You know, the brain controls everything from seeing to walking to talking to doing mathematics, and it actually controls our personality. And we have seen that although somebody looks pretty good, hey, they're able to walk and talk and stuff like that, a lot of times personalities can change. A major problem after a stroke is depression. And we see a lot of that, and we see a lot of personality change.
And we have to close it there. Dr. Neal, thanks so much for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me.
I'm Judy Woodruff. On the next NewsHour, Starbucks pushed to provide a college education to its workers. That's Wednesday on the PBS NewsHour.
The Greatest Generation Naval Museum in El Cajon recently hosted a special group of World War II veterans. KPBS reporter Susan Murphy shows us the sights and sounds of the historic aircraft that brought back vivid memories from seven decades ago.
It's always good to be in a cockpit.
It's been a lifetime since some of these World War II veterans sat in the cockpit of a fighter jet.
I like airplanes. I did from the time I could walk.
Now they're getting a chance to relive history at the Greatest Generation Naval Museum at Gillespie Field.
We will get you in and we will get you out.
The one-year-old museum is filled with more than a dozen refurbished World War II-era planes.
Well, it brings back memories that I don't think about very often.
Each is flyable and has a story behind it. So do these veterans. They're all former prisoners of war.
Got shot down on January 5th of 44 on my 7th mission.
91-year-old Ed Davidson from La Jolla lost his co-pilot and half his crew that day. He recalls escaping from the burning B-17 onto a life raft.
And we got to spend about 4 hours in our life rafts paddling towards shore when the Germans came out in a flying boat and took us as prisoners of war.
90-year-old Ralph Kling of Ramona has a similar story. He flew a P-47 Thunderbolt and was hit over Luxembourg.
Plane's on fire. I managed to get out my right-hand side. My legs are burned up to my knees and my head is burned because I lost my helmet bailing out.
Kling was held prisoner in a German camp for a year. He says he's honored to be part of a group of veterans the museum is named after. He says they followed a simple formula.
If there's a job to get done, you figure out how to do it the best way for not for yourself, but for the people that you're with.
92-year-old James Riley was a bombardier who was captured by the Germans on his 10th mission. He says his fellow World War II veterans were dedicated, hardworking, and overcame a lot.
We knew what it was, many of us, to be hungry. And I said, I don't think many other generations before ours ever experienced that. You know, we went through the Great Depression, then 7 years later or so, World War II started.
These members of the greatest generation hope the collection of planes will serve as an authentic history lesson for younger generations. Kling offers this advice.
If you don't make it the first time, just keep trying. And if you don't make it the second time, look around and find somebody else, and the two of you do it together, and you'll do it. You'll make it.
Susan Murphy, KPBS News.
For more information on the museum, visit our website at kpbs.org. Of course, you can find tonight's stories as well on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.